It was a nice house. Large, spacious, built in the style of the turn of the last century as a hotel for people traveling to see the Waitomo caves. They would take the rail out past Otorohanga, then a carriage up the road to the building on the hill, where they'd stay briefly before venturing onward to the cavernous wonders and their tiny bio-luminescent inhabitants. But this isn't the story of the caves, it is the story of a hotel which was later a house, and, to some degree, a home. It was the early 90s when this fairly young, only slightly dysfunctional family came to reside within its walls. They too had close ties to the famous caves, which was why it was important to them that they live reasonably near, although still far enough from neighbors that even the most emphatic screaming could not be heard from the house or its grounds. For a time, things were quiet in this place which, in times gone by, had been conjoined to the portion which remained in the original location atop the hill. These days, it was down from its old resting spot, carved up and pulled apart, hauled by men and horses down the hill, a short walk from a river, surrounded by a tree-lined road outside and a couple of acres of land behind it. Inside it resided now a family of 5, and quietly, as though in the corners or dark of the hallways, unseen around corners or hidden from view, a foreboding and lingering feeling of disquiet. As the family settled into their new accommodation, it seemed as though the accommodation settled around them too. Bumps, creaks, mysterious noises in the quiet of the night, a screeching pukeko looking for love, a ruru owl telling any who would care to listen that they were there too, and visitors or inhabitants who would occasionally let themselves be known. It was a night as common as any day when it happened. A faint, mysterious knocking sound like a knuckle on wood, moving down the corridor. The thoroughfare was clad in wooden slats from the ground to about chest high, above it, very outdated wallpaper which served to add to the quaint charm of the place. Down this long path with rooms off to the sides left and right, came the sound. As though someone was walking down it dragging their knuckle against the wall just to hear the clunk, 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 clunk as they made their way along the slatted walls. From safe and warm in his bed he listened and wondered which of the family it was who was still up at that time of night. He listened as the knocking made its way down the corridor, pausing on one side of a doorframe for a moment only to continue on once the knocker had passed. Clunk, 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 it continued down the hallway until it reached the end only to begin once more on the same wall, but now in the opposite direction. Clunk, 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 pause as the doorway was reached, clunk, 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 up the hall until again, it reached the far end and stopped, but only briefly, before it made its way down the corridor once more. He listened to it as it came down the hallway again, listened to the pause as it crossed the span of the doorway, then continued on along the wall at the portal's other side. Clunk, 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 it passed right on the other side of the wall from where the head of his bed rested, down, toward the bathroom at the far end, where it stopped. While it could well have been explained away that it was a family member was, for whatever reason that night, walking the corridor, gently tapping along the slatted walls, there was one significant factor which stood in the way of that being true. Outside the listener's bedroom, on the opposite wall to where his bed had resided, was a bookcase, filled with encyclopedias of different sets, and other useful books of reference. Where there should have been 2 pauses, one from passing by the door and a second from passing by the shelves, stacked as they were with worldly knowledge, there was only the one break in the knocking. This content was provided by angelotricarico.com.